An autumn feast of exotic fruit and vegetables. The ingredients for these dishes evolved thousands of years ago in faraway lands. Salads from Siberia, peppers from Peru, chilies from Bolivia. But this food has been homegrown in England. For Sarah Wayne, both chef and gardener here in West Dean Gardens in Chichester, the challenge was not only to cook the meal, but grow all the ingredients herself in an unpredictable British climate. It all began 9 months ago in the greenhouse.
This is where I'll be growing the watermelon for the ice cream. I'm hoping for another hot summer, and I'll have to make sure that I give the plant plenty of water. This is where I'll be growing the chilies for the mango chili ice cream. And chilies come from South America, where it can be very hot, and they really need that heat to be successful. This is the house where we'll be growing cucumbers for cucumber soup. And although it's really cold at the moment, by March it'll be a very warm and humid environment.
If Sarah's plants are to flourish in the coming months, she needs to get the recipe for growth just right. The ingredients are simple: heat, sunlight, the gas carbon dioxide, and water. Add to that nutrients in the soil, and the plants will make their own food for growth in the process of photosynthesis. For Sarah, the whole process began 9 months ago, back in winter. Winter, and outside the faint winter light and frozen groundwater has brought life almost to a standstill. Because the ingredients for photosynthesis are in too short supply, the plants lie either dead or dormant. But at West Dean, preparations for life have already begun. Sarah needs to kickstart the process by releasing nutrients into the soil.
Here we're putting through garden rubbish through the shredder. It's going to make a pile of fresh compost here, and in 12 months' time we'll be able to use it on the garden beds. It's a really good growing.
Somehow, the nutrients trapped within the dead vegetation from last year's crop need to be released. As the chili rots away, invisible to the naked eye, microscopic bacteria multiply inside its decaying body. At the same time, fungi begin to spread throughout the plant's tissues. These decomposers slowly digest the shredded plants. Valuable nutrients which were trapped in their dead tissues are now returned to the soil.
This is fresh compost just out of the shredder, and after 12 months we get this lovely soil that we're going to use in garden beds, in the glass houses and places like that.
As the decomposers digest the dead plants, something else seems to be taking place in the compost heap. As the dead plants are digested, energy is released in the form of heat. What we are seeing is the release of energy that was trapped months ago by the plants through photosynthesis. It's an indication of the massive energy transfer from sunlight to plant life, which is going to take place in the greenhouses in the coming months. spring, and light has brought life to the greenhouse. And beneath the glass, the race for growth has begun. In the struggle to burst through the soil, the seedlings have used up their food reserves. They now need light to make new food by photosynthesis.
It's light that they need, and I hope by the end of summer that they will be virtually covering the whole of the glasshouse structure above me.
During the spring months, the cucumbers race upwards. The tendrils flail around, searching for support to pull the plants towards the sunlight. During the day, the leaves are exposed to the sunlight. It's here in these leaves that the critical energy transfer from the sunlight takes place. Within the individual cells of the leaves are the microscopic chloroplasts. It's here that the green substance, chlorophyll, absorbs the sunlight, using its energy to create the plant food through photosynthesis. This is the big energy transfer. The plant is transferring the energy of sunlight into chemical energy. But sometimes Sarah deliberately denies the plants light by growing them in pots. However, there is method behind this apparent madness.
The rhubarb's really good. It's this lovely red ruby colour, and it's this colour because it's been forced in a rhubarb forcer, as opposed to this, which is very green, very coarse and very large and inedible now.
But why are the plants outside the pot inedible? During the spring, the rhubarb outside the pots has been happily photosynthesizing. Using the light energy trapped in the chloroplasts, turning the raw ingredients of water and carbon dioxide into plant sugars. If we now look closer at the individual cells of the plant, we see that it has stored these sugars in hundreds of tiny starch grains. Inside the pots, there's a different story. Desperately seeking light, the rhubarb races up stems become taller and slender. Starved of sunlight, the rhubarb is unable to photosynthesize. But how does this affect the plant? If we take a closer look at the leaves of the rhubarb, we see in the cells that the starch grains are few and far between. This is a sure sign that the plant has been unable to manufacture its sugary food. Outside, the rhubarb is gorging on sunlight. It has grown fat and full of starch. The stems are tough and inedible. So it's only in the pots that the stems deprived of sunlight are tender enough to eat. As spring draws to an end, the rhubarb in the pot is ready for harvesting. As summer approaches, life in the greenhouse is hotting up. It's summer at West Dean, and Sarah's chilli crop is well on the way. Back in spring, the chilies blossomed. As the plants continued to photosynthesize, the young fruits of the chilies began to grow. Now, in summer, photosynthesis is at full pace, and sunlight and carbon dioxide are in ample supply. But now it's up to Sarah to provide the third crucial ingredient for photosynthesis: water. Most photosynthesis happens in the leaves, but the water doesn't enter the plant through the leaves. It has to come through the roots. Tiny root hairs, a single cell thick, penetrate the soil. The water enters the plant by a process called osmosis. But to reach the photosynthesizing leaves, somehow the water needs to defy gravity. It's in the leaves themselves that this process begins. On the underside of the leaves are tiny pores, stomata. When they open, water evaporates and escapes into the air. The water passes through the roots and is now sucked upwards through thin veins called xylem vessels. The water finally enters the leaves to be used for photosynthesis or to evaporate and start the whole process again. As summer draws to an end, the ingredients for Sarah's meal are well on their way. But in the watermelon greenhouse, all's not well.
Hasn't been a good year for growing watermelons. We haven't had enough sun, and we've had a lot of cold winds during the summer months, and that's not ideal for growing good watermelons. But we've managed to get one, but in a good year we'd want more.
Although Sarah has been able to provide the watermelon with plenty of water, because of the overcast days, she couldn't provide it with enough heat. But why is heat, or lack of it, so important? It's all to do with special molecules that control photosynthesis, called enzymes. The water molecules bind with these enzymes. It's only by binding with the enzymes that the water molecule into two. The molecules have to split into two for photosynthesis to take place. On a hot day, the water molecules are frantic, continually binding and unbinding with the enzymes. Photosynthesis takes place and the plant grows. But on a cold day, the molecules move more slowly. The critical binding with the enzyme slows down, and photosynthesis is hardly happening at all. There were simply too many of these cold summer days this year. There was too little photosynthesis, and most of the crop failed. But not only does Sarah have to worry about cold weather, she also has to worry about things getting too hot.
In the middle of summer, the worst problem is too much sunlight into the glasshouse, which means the temperature inside really builds up. And if I don't vent the glasshouses like this, the plants could shrivel up and die.
When it gets too hot, things start to go wrong. Too much heat causes the enzyme molecule to lose its critical shape. It denatures. Having lost its shape, the water molecules can no longer bind to it. If this happens, the plant cannot photosynthesize, so ultimately it will shrivel up and die. So Sarah has to keep the temperature just right, neither too hot nor too cold, if she's to have a chance of getting the perfect crop. As the summer draws to an end, the growing season is nearly over, and it's time for Sarah to harvest the ingredients for the feast. It's autumn, and at West Dean, the crowds gather for the annual Chili Festival. It's time for Sarah to harvest the ingredients for the feast. In growing such an array of exotic vegetables, Sarah has achieved something quite remarkable. Back in winter, by building compost heaps, she maximised the release of nutrients back into the soil. In spring, she used greenhouses to protect the delicate plants from the unpredictable weather. In summer, Sarah continued to nurture the plants, protecting some from drought and others from the destructive power of the summer heat. By nurturing the plants in the artificial environment of the greenhouse, Sarah's exotics, or most of them, have flourished. Despite the British climate. From the simple ingredients of water, carbon dioxide, and a sprinkling of nutrients, Sarah has turned the energy of sunlight into plant life.
Watermelon on it.
As her fellow gardeners enjoy the meal, in each mouthful we see the beginnings of yet another massive energy transfer.